I hear you fine.
Great. Should I start my presentation? Yes or no?
Let me just introduce you,
Start?
ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start our next session. It is living in a truly decentralized world. And first of all, I would like to thank David Chaum. He's the founder of XX Network, and he's taken out his time today to join us all the way from California in USA. David is the creator of the XX coin and the founder of the XX Network. David is a pioneer in cryptography and privacy preserving technologies, and he is widely recognized as the inventor of digital cash. David holds a PhD in computer science from the UC Berkeley and has taught at the NYU Graduate School of Business and the University of California. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. David Chaum, the founder of XX Network. David, here you go. Yes, David, you can proceed.
Okay. um, yes. Okay. Great. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you, and I wanted to say that I feel like I've been to Indonesia because I know so many Indonesian people from the 15 years when I lived in Amsterdam, and I'm so familiar with Indonesian food and culture and everything from that, but I've never actually been to Indonesia. So this is kind of fun. Anyways, and I hope to be able to visit in person someday soon. Um, it's all about decentralization, but decentralization is actually really about digital cash. That is the key ingredient, and that's the thing that kicked it off with the Satoshi white paper and so on. And you may notice that the name digital cash has the same initials that I do. David Chaum, digital cash. Why is that? That's because I invented it and I gave it that name in 1982, if you can believe it. And that's also the year I founded the International Association for Cryptologic Research, which is a very critical aspect of all this, and I'll come to that in a moment. And it's also when I wrote my dissertation at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, about blockchain, and I gave a whole specification, in effect, a program to implement blockchain. So I basically invented blockchain, and you can read about that also at chaum.com. And the DigiCash company, you can see all the things we did, and I'll come a little bit to that in a minute. But you can also see that I've done some really important voting work on a new kind of election technology that has two aspects which are critical going forward. And we have launched our Elixir blockchain, which is the first and only system that actually provides metadata shredding of messaging. And that is turned out to be also an important part of the decentralized world. And more recently, we announced the final piece, that is Praxis. It is a quantum secure consensus, BFT, and digital currency. So let me just give this historical slide here, which someone in my company found and put this together. I just saw it a few minutes ago. Basically, they called this conference in 1994 that I was at. I gave the keynote. There was one other keynote. That was Tim Berners-Lee. Mine was first. His was second. And in mine, I made the first e-cash payment, the first digital cash payment, and it was from CERN in Geneva, where the World Wide Web was invented, to our offices in Amsterdam. So someone called this the Woodstock of the web. It was the first World Wide Web conference, and I gave the keynote there and demoed eCash because people realized how important electronic money, and in particular digital cash, would be to the online world. But really, I think I realized, and everyone is now starting to come to realize, there's probably, you could say, 5 important aspects of the decentralized world. So true digital cash is somehow key, but you also need to back that up with a secure store of value. And I think that makes perfect sense, but the types of store of value we've seen out there haven't really been up to the challenge. Most systems don't really have Byzantine fault tolerance. They're not really secure. The kind of cryptography they're based on is very questionable and weak, promulgated by the US government, which recently got caught compromising all the cryptography for most countries around the world that they bought from Switzerland, because those companies were actually fake companies run by the CIA. You can read about it. That's all very interesting. I knew those companies. I broke those codes back in the day, but they never told their customers. So there's another aspect, which is sort of a democracy aspect. I mean, once you get to the prosperity and the security of value, then you want to have a more decentralized form of governance. So you need a kind of scalable democracy. We haven't seen that. So I developed something which is called sample voting, and you can read about it at Chaum.com, and that's what we're using in the XX network. So it scales with the size and complexity of society. It cannot be manipulated, but it's also, interestingly, the only real practical way to do voting that's not in voting booths. So when you want to have online voting, which is the hope for democracy, you have to solve the problem of people selling their votes by sort of live streaming their voting act. And the only decent solution to that I'm aware of is our decoy ballot technology and proof of decoy, and that's something that we're moving forward with, and has actually been tried in some binding elections. You can read about it online. There's of course, blockchain, smart contracts, decentralized applications. This is all critical infrastructure. And back in the day, I was involved in a kind of like the inverse of the Church Turing thesis. We showed that any kind of security problem could be solved by, in effect, distributed multi-party computation, essentially a blockchain. And then the final 5th piece is privacy in communication, not the fake privacy of so-called strong end-to-end encryption, but actual metadata shredding. So we'll come to those issues. This is an overview of what's needed in the truly decentralized world, and all the components are things that I worked on. But you see this ICR up in the upper right is actually like a sun shining down on the whole thing, because it's the technology that it's cryptography, and it was sort of the freeing of cryptography that has allowed the decentralized world to start taking shape. Because in 1982, the head of the U.S. National Security Agency wrote threatening letters to the scientific organizations saying they should not have conferences or even sessions about cryptography, but because it was in effect born classified, and they would all be put in jail and worse, even if they, had these conferences. So being a graduate student at Berkeley, and realizing in those right around 82 how powerful cryptography could be for decentralizing power in the world, which is really what we're talking about, I decided to organize a conference on cryptography. So I did it without using telecommunications, and you can learn about that elsewhere. I'm not going into the details, but when I announced the membership and the fact that it was going to have international events, and it was sort of protected by the United Nations at that time, and so the U.S. government backed down on trying to stop open public research in cryptography at that moment, and now we have, conferences, 2 annual conferences, and about 4 to 5 workshops every year, and we publish a journal with Springer and so forth. So it's the dominant independent scientific organization that is for people doing research in cryptography, that is theory and applications. And it was created in order to free cryptography, and it was very successful at that. And so what is this digital cash that I mentioned? Well, it's simply, everyone knows, basically, cash is not like credit cards or something. Cash is something, is a payment technology that has essentially instant finality, irreversibility. So when you pay someone, it's done. That's it. There's no going back on it. There's no waiting. It just happens like that. And there's no paper trail made. There's no record of it. It's private. Those are the 2 things that are key attributes of cash, and this is what has enabled, the prosperity that we've seen over the last, several centuries at least grow. It's all been based on cash, and now we're talking about a digital form of cash which has to have these same properties. So that's the key thing. But as I mentioned, when you make digital cash, it has to be also suitable as a store of value. It cannot be easy for someone to, like a nation state, to destroy it, to take it down by putting more money in and sort of getting all the votes, or breaking the cryptography because it's cryptography that they issued in the first place and that they know how to break already, or it could be by some kind of disruption of the network if it doesn't have the real secure Byzantine. It's not real fault. So the major chains that are out there aren't Byzantine fault tolerant. They're not based on anything but U.S. government's standard cryptography. And if you had enough resources, you could easily take them down. So that's not suitable. What we've done is built a system that's really secure, even against national adversaries. And that's what the game is now. And that's our practice. So you have to have a secure consensus and payments in order to make the payments secure. And we've got it. And it's running, but it's not publicly running yet, but it is running in the lab, you'll be happy to know. Or not in the lab, but it's running all over the place globally, but not yet that publicly. And then, privacy is another theme that I've been working on from the beginning, and everyone realizes that it's essential for democracy because you need at least privacy of your vote, if not ballot secrecy. Otherwise, there's no possibility for meaningful democracy. And you need to be able to communicate with your friends and family to kind of develop your political opinions, knowing that those communications are protected forever, basically. And there's a very misleading sort of claim that is often made by all kinds of people, and that is, well, don't worry, you have privacy in our messaging system because we use strong end-to-end encryption. That's so misleading at so many levels. I really don't have time to go into it, but it's not really strong, and it's not necessarily end-to-end because of the man in the middle that the system provider could do, and it's not really the issue, because anyone in the intelligence world will tell you that the real thing is who talks to who and when. It's not, you don't want to listen in on exactly what everyone's saying, because they'll speak in code, they'll mislead you. You don't have time for that. So the real privacy thing, if you're interested in mass surveillance, is the metadata, which is, Cambridge Analytica. Everyone starting to really realize is the big elephant in the middle room, the real problem, the social graph. That's what needs to be protected. And so we've found a way to do that. It's the only known. I proposed a way in '79, and the only speed up was what we are using at Elixir, which I invented about 5 years ago. That speeds it up by a factor of 1,000, so it can actually be used in text messaging. So we call it metadata shredding. It just means that as a message travels through the network, each hop only knows a little bit about where it might be going, because they know who they got it from and where it was in the list, but they really don't know much about it. And then even before that tracing information is consolidated and constituted, everyone shreds it separately. So it's like shredded before it even becomes metadata, actually. So that's our Elixir technology. And just a little bit about our company. We have an office in the Cayman Islands, a development office. No one else really does that. Most people have sort of fake offshore company. We really have a development lab there, and that's where Praxis is. This is the view outside the window of our offices there. This is our offices in California. Some of the people that work there and some of the key people that have been with us from the beginning are in this picture. And one of them is also over here announcing our messenger, that thousands of people used our messenger over our network. And this is me announcing the consensus and money. And we made it public recently, and this is when I announced the messaging in Singapore, and this is from Germany. So Web3. So basically, I would urge you, if you're interested in knowing what's really going on in this space, the real stuff, then read this barcode, this QR code, or come to xx.network. You can join our collective and keep abreast of what's going on. We're in beta now. We've got several hundred nodes, high performance nodes around the world, and a lot is happening. And we'd love to. We're all about actual users joining and controlling and supporting the network. So really urge you to come in. Also check out chaum.com if you want to sort of see how all this stuff really started. So we're kind of the real deal. We just haven't been hyping it. We haven't been just trying to run off with a lot of money. We're just building the real stuff, and it's starting to work, and we're getting a lot of really excellent support from the community. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to meet you someday in Indonesia.
David? Hello, David, you still there? David, are you still there? Ladies and gentlemen, just bear with us for a moment. David, hi. David, Can you hear us?
I'm sorry I can't hear anything, but it's great. No, I hear nothing.
I will text you the questions.
I'm sorry I can't hear anything, but it was great to be here.
Hi, David. I've just texted you the question by Varut. If you can answer that.
Um, uh, you know, make no mistake, the types of blockchain technology which is currently out there will not stand an attack by a nation state. And currency and domination of global currencies and payments is now a major weapon globally. And so if you think that nation states don't care about cryptocurrency and won't, I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken. This is the emerging decentralization of power in the world, and it has to be built in a way that protects the privacy of users genuinely, which is metadata shredding, and it has to be resistant to attacks by nation states. So you can read about it. The U.S. government was caught red-handed bribing one of the big security companies, RSA Security, with $10 million in cash to build a trapdoor into one of the public standards. And that's a critical standard because it's the random number generator that a lot of keys are based on. So that's an example. And they were caught recently, and the Swiss are outraged by operating the major companies in the world that sold cryptographic gear to all the governments except the big governments for military and diplomatic purposes. All that stuff was fake. And you could just read about it. So Edward Snowden told us that they have been implementing the full take for years. That means every single message that's sent around the world, they pick it up. So the only way to have some level of robustness against the national adversary and protect message, privacy against this kind of technology, this kind of effort, which exists in several countries now. It's not just the U.S. that has the full take. A number of countries have access to it, apparently, including China, according to the news, several years ago already. So it's like, if you want to feel like you can communicate with people about things that matter, which is a necessary condition for democracy, then you need something different from strong end-to-end encryption from the RSA company or something like that. For the U.S. government standards, not a good idea. Those are Trojan horses. Those are fake. That's a trick. It's a honeypot. You've got to use something different. And if you think that the government is way behind in terms of being able to break codes, it's never been true. Look at the kind of money they have and things they buy. It's unbelievable. So it's quite naive. So yeah, you can say, oh, quantum secure, that's ridiculous. Yeah. The U.S. government, you can read about it. They were using cryogenic computers in the 60s at NSA. I mean, these people have no resource constraints, and they're ruthless. Yeah. So So back to the first question. Yes, it is unfortunate. Some would say inevitable, perhaps, that we've seen such a tremendous, scandalous, abusive theft from the public over and over and over again in this space. And, don't blame me. I mean, it's not nothing to do with what we're doing. We've been building the real stuff quietly. We haven't, tried to, raise a lot of money by some scams, or we'd have no venture backing. We are just doing this to build the real stuff, and we're gaining a lot of really solid support and now deployment in, we're in 60 countries now with high performance servers. So what we're doing will empower, it decentralizes power. It will empower the small entrepreneur, the individual, to, both, engage in new kinds of economic activity and accumulate secure wealth in a way that's outside of the control of governments, unfortunately, but may also work with their blessings. I'm going to just end with one brief note, which just ties this all together, I think. 25 years ago, I was flying all over the world in a previous time because there was so much interest in the eCash that my DigiCash company issued. And I met with central banks in like a dozen countries and biggest commercial banks around the world, and so on, and people from governments. And one of the things I told them was, hey, your country could position itself to be friendly to this new kind of DigiCash and electronic currency, and it could become the global leader in electronic commerce. Now, none of these governments took me up on it, so none of them did. And so now, it's fallen to, Google and Amazon and Facebook, just because they are operating in the largest market. But if one of those countries had taken the initiative to really, create the legal infrastructure and to actually issue digital cash as a national currency, they would have benefited enormously. And so, that's an option for a country like Indonesia. Think about it. You can try to suppress blockchain. You could try to co-opt it and use it to, strengthen centralized structures, or you could embrace it as something that empowers entrepreneurship and the individual accumulation of wealth, which, as we've seen historically, is the thing that generates wealth for nation states over and over again. And that would be an awesome thing to do. In any case, you can count on the XX Network. We're your friends. We want to work with you. And I'm looking forward to visiting Indonesia sometime. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, David. It was wonderful to have you with us. I know you're having difficulties. You can't hear us, but it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to have you. And we will look forward to see you in Bali. We will look forward to see you in Bali. We will call you for the Block Bali conference in November. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you can all be tuned for the next session, which will be coming up at about 2 p.m. Indonesia time. So we will start the next session at 2 p.m. Indonesia time. Till that time, it will be a prayer break and a lunch break. I'll see you again at 2 p.m. Indonesia time. Thank you.